Welcome back to Nuclear News. The nuclear renaissance is unfolding before our very eyes, and we're just staying on top of what is going on because it's revolutionary on every single level. Sprott Uranium Miners ETF up 37.54% this year, taking a breather, allowing people to get in slowly but surely from the dollar cost averagers, still outperforming the broader market in a big way. Now, let's understand, because that's price action. Prices always end up catching up to the fundamentals of the space. Now, this headline speaks volumes to what is actually going on in this space. Biden-Harris administration announced $7 billion for America's first clean hydrogen hubs, driving clean manufacturing and delivering new economic opportunities nationwide, right? So clean hydrogen is one of the ways that these big governments are trying to escape fossil fuels. Now, the only way that hydrogen is going to work is if they use nuclear power. Clean hydrogen is a flexible energy carrier that can be produced from a diverse mix of domestic clean energy sources, including renewables, nuclear, and fossil resources with safe and responsible carbon capture. We know all roads lead to nuclear at the end of the day because trillions of dollars have been pumped into renewables, and we've gotten practically zero results from that. They're trying to move away from fossil fuels, which is going to be way more difficult than they realize, but the only way to ever get away from fossil fuels is to invest in nuclear, right? So nuclear will power hydrogen, which is turning into a huge industry. Bruce Power-backed hydrogen study wins IESO funding. The study by Kinetrix and Fuel Cell Energy, supported by Bruce Power, will explore the potential of using nuclear-generated electricity to produce hydrogen. It is one of 6 projects selected to receive a share of the first $5.5 million of funding from Ontario's government new Hydrogen Innovation Fund. So just one example of governments indirectly or directly investing heavily into nuclear energy. Support for nuclear has grown dramatically, says global agency chief. 20 countries met at the end of September and committed to nuclear energy as part of the solution to reaching net zero emission targets, the largest shift toward a global accord on the technology in decades. So governments are starting to realize what we have realized for the last 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 years, that they have to invest heavily into nuclear, right? Early stage investors are already investing in the scarce above ground fuel, which is going to power nuclear energy. Nuclear can count as net zero tech, draft EU Parliament deal shows. Thanks for showing up, EU Parliament, right? Finally trying to submit legislation which will enable a wall of capital, trillions of dollars into nuclear energy. Again, we're still in the early stages of the mass adoption of nuclear. I say that every week, but every single week, it seems like something brand new happens to make this even more exponential. Annual projections rise again as countries turn to nuclear for energy security and climate action, right? Annual demand projections continue to grow because of headlines like this. Clean nuclear power, NC legislature says yes with veto override. Once the scourge of environmentalists for its radioactive waste, nuclear power is now clean officially in North Carolina. At least that's the view of state law after both chambers of the General Assembly on Tuesday overrode Governor Roy Cooper's veto of energy-related legislation passed in September. So it can't be stopped. X Energy is working with Public Utility Commission of Texas in its efforts to bring advanced small nuclear reactors to the market. We are ecstatic about the X Energy Dow project, but we need more of them. Our goal in this process is to figure out how we can get more of them going. Small modular reactors will power everything in the world, and that is what is exciting, right? This is a multi-decade revolution taking place in Earth's energy. It doesn't get bigger than this. Jordan advances nuclear power program with support from IAEA SMR platforms, small modular reactors. With support from the IAEA platform and small modular reactors, Jordan is making strides towards the introduction of nuclear power to produce both electricity and drinking water. This is the revolution of clean, reliable, sustainable baseload energy. You can make water from it. You can do lots and lots of things with low-cost energy. You can desalinate the oceans. You can essentially solve world hunger, right? It's massive. That's why it's so important to understand what is going on with the future fuel of Earth, why uranium prices have climbed to their highest in over a decade. Weekly uranium prices touched their highest since 2011 this month. The market is definitely in a structural deficit as demand is growing at a 5% annual rate, and the current 2023 gap between global production and consumption remains at over 50 million pounds. Imagine that. There's a supply demand deficit of 50 million pounds in 2023. That's why prices rise. This is how commodities work. If you understand the supply demand fundamentals of a commodity, you understand its price action. And that's what we're seeing. Now, again, early stage investors have been on top of this, but the fact that there's still a supply crunch that isn't being solved anytime soon, and we have Wall Street firms taking supply off the market cheap right now at $70 per pound, making it even worse, is all you need to know going forward about what's going on in this space. And then we have sketchy activities going on with one of the biggest uranium suppliers in the world. The October 2 resignation of Yerzhan Mukhanov as CEO of Kazatomprom marked the seventh senior leadership resignation at the world's largest uranium miner since May. Most of these executives have been forced to resign from the Kazakh state-owned company. Knowledgeable sources told Energy Intelligence, or they resigned due to concerns about pressure from Samruk Kazyna. That's the Kazakh sovereign wealth fund that owns 75% of Kazatomprom. And that is said to have pressured some company leadership to implement decisions that they perceive as against the interests of Kazatomprom. Simultaneously, concerns are mounting within the uranium industry and within Kazakhstan over how much influence Russian officials and Russian nuclear giant Rosatom have over Kazatomprom's decisions, right? So we're entering a polarized world where the Eastern countries, Russia, China, Iran, India, are kind of creating their own Eastern bloc. Obviously, they want as much power over Kazatomprom as possible, but they don't want the West to have exposure to crucial resources. So that maybe what's going on here, which again would just make the supply tighter for Western countries in the midst of our 2023 supply crunch. Now, this is a company most uranium investors, I don't know why, are sleeping on, but it's one of the few uranium miners cash flowing, actually producing solid net income in this environment. Centrus begins enrichment operations in Ohio. Today, Centrus Energy announced that it has begun enrichment operations at its high-assay, low-enriched uranium facility in Piketon, Ohio, and expects to begin withdrawing HALEU product later this month. It is the only NRC-licensed HALEU facility in the United States and the first new U.S.-owned, U.S.-tech uranium enrichment plant to begin production since 1954, right? This company should become a cash cow, right? Because not only is it one of the few scarce assets in the US actually producing uranium, but prices are going up. It's one of the assets very few people seem to be excited about in this space, but one of the assets with the best fundamentals. And we can do a deep dive on this asset and any other asset you want on my uranium Patreon. This is another asset starting to cash flow. Boss achieved significant milestone with commencement of mining operations on Honeymoon. So there are a few assets out there just taking full advantage of the uranium price rising and just emerging as cash cow machines for their shareholders. Again, we'll stay on top of all the developments in this space, but just so much going on for this nascent, emerging, revolutionary fuel source.